Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2, long time no see. Sorry I haven't really been uploading, there just hasn't been a whole lot to cover when it comes to the division, but the update TU10 just came out, and with that there are a decent amount of changes, which means a lot of videos for me to make. So just like today, I'm going to be making some videos, in the future about builds, etc, etc. So thank you guys so much for, coming by again. Sorry I haven't been uploading like I said, but anyways, today we're going to be talking about what the best AR DPS build currently is. If you're trying to do a whole bunch of damage while using an assault rifle, this is going to be the build for you. As you can see, I'm able to do upwards of 1 million damage per headshot with this build, so this is just absolutely insane. And like I said, I will be making some build videos in the future. Right now I'm going to put 3 options on screen for you guys, and whatever one you guys want to see, just comment below that respective number. So if you want to see build number 1, just comment down below number 1, and then based on how many comments I get of each respective, build and whatever you guys want to see the most is what I will make a video on soonest. So please let me know down in the comments, and if there's any other builds that you'd like to see from me, please let me know as well. Now before I get into the build, if you guys would like to see me make builds in real time or maybe just ask me some questions, feel free to check me out over at Twitch at twitch.tv/Nick2. I stream every once in a while whenever there's an update and stuff, and I'd love to see more of you guys around. And also, if any of you need help making this build or making any other perfect build for, maybe setting up your build for the raid, or maybe you're trying to get ready just to do some legendary with friends, any build, no matter what it is, please feel free to email me at nick2biz@gmail.com, and I would love to help you guys out with that. I'm able to help with pretty much anything you need. So, alright, so starting off with the build, like always, let's just get into the specialization. By the way, if my camera looks bad, I'm sorry. I haven't made videos in a little bit, so a lot of my settings are scuffed, and, there's some problems here and there, but whatever. So, starting off with the specialization, the best thing to use is the gunner for pure damage. Not only does this give you armor on kill, it also makes every third reload 50% faster, but the main thing is that you're getting 5% rate of fire on kill for 5 seconds. This is really nice, and you're also getting weapon handling when you're in cover. The specialization doesn't matter too much. If there's like a preference you have, just use whatever you want, although the gunner is going to net you more damage overall. Now in terms of changes that have impacted this build, ultimately the build is still very similar. However, there are some important key things that have changed that I'm going to mention, namely what weapon you're going to be using. The big takeaway though from this video is that you're basically going to be using almost exactly what you were using like 2 months ago, like in TU8 or whatever, if you're going to be using an assault rifle build. However, a couple things have changed, and using a pure assault rifle build has simply just gotten stronger. So I don't know if you guys know, but assault rifles have gotten buffed twice. It got buffed in TU9 to where the health damage went from, I think it was like 12 or 11% all the way up to 21%, which is a pretty good buff. But also on top of that, they also buffed the base damage of a number of assault rifles, which changed the hierarchy of what the best and worst assault rifle is by a little bit. But also this just gave assault rifles almost across the board, I'd say on average like an 8% buff. And on top of that, they also nerfed the Petrov gloves and nerfed the MG5, so that kind of inadvertently makes AR stronger than they were previously as well. So there's almost never been a better time to use an AR than right now, at least wise, while Warlords has been out. So that's great for all you AR lovers, and I'm a big fan of using ARs as well, so I'm really happy about that. So getting into the build, let's just talk about weapons first, because that's pretty much, like I said, that's the grunt of the changes, and then I'll talk about some of the other changes. But the main changes that have happened are the weapons and what weapon you want to use. Personally, I think the best all-around assault rifle is going to be the Eagle Bear, although I know a lot of you guys, aren't going to be able to get the Eagle Bear, and that's perfectly fine. You don't need the Eagle Bear. I think it's really good for a variety of reasons, and it also got a little bit of a buff. I'll talk about the Eagle Bear, and then I'll talk about a couple of the other guns. So the reason that I really like to use the Eagle Bear is it has a pretty sizable, amount of base damage. The base damage on it got buffed, and, it just does a whole lot of damage, as well as it being a P416 variant. It's overall just going to be a really good gun. On top of that, it has a 60-round mag, while all the others are only able to get up to a 50-round mag. Unfortunately, it has headshot damage baked in, but that's okay. It gets a whole bunch of free accuracy from the Eagle Strike talent here, and tenacity gives you a lot of damage reduction, which means that you can play a lot more riskier and a lot more aggressive, and without worrying about dying. One of the buffs that it got, not only did it get a base damage buff, I don't know why it's showing the mods on that gun. What is happening here? I'm trying to show the mods on the Eagle Bear, not my G36. Okay, this game's bad. Let me swap my guns around. Maybe this will fix it. There we go. Okay, 10th try is a charm. So not only did it get a base damage buff, but they also changed the grip to be, instead of 10% stability, is now 10% weapon handling. And they also buffed weapon handling, so every 1% weapon handling gives you 1% stability, accuracy, weapon swap speed, and reload speed. So this pretty much gave the Eagle Bear a 10% reload speed buff, as well as giving it just 10% more accuracy, as well as the 10% stability that you already had. And on top of that, the Eagle Bear gets a flat 10% crit chance on the scope and a 15% crit damage muzzle. So overall, the Eagle Bear is really strong, but if you're just focused on doing pure damage, the assault rifle that does the highest damage mathematically currently is the FAMAS. However, I would not recommend it. I think that it is very strong and, like I said, mathematically going to do the highest amount of damage. The reason that I don't personally like to use the FAMAS is because with it having very high RPM comes some shortcomings. Not only does this mean that you're going to be spending a significant more amount of time reloading than you would with a gun such as, P416 with like 750 RPM, but on top of that, this game has a lot of hit detection problems. I don't know if you guys have ever used like Striker, and you can kind of see where you'll be looking at your stat count and the stat count won't go up, or it'll randomly just like drop a significant amount even though it doesn't seem like you're missing, just because this game has really bad hit detection problems, and that is exacerbated a lot when you have a gun that is much higher RPM. So if you guys have ever used a gun that's like 1,000 or even like 1,200, like a Vector or whatever, you'll notice that you'll get a lot of ghost bullets. That happens less and less the lower your RPM is, so that's why I typically like to use guns that are lower RPM if there is an option to. However, if you really like the FAMAS or you have a good one, you can go for it. Like I said, it is mathematically the strongest, but with it having higher RPM leads to some problems with hit detection, you getting ghost bullets, and you having to reload more frequently. Next to the FAMAS would be the Police M4. This pretty much has the exact same problems though. And the Police M4, like all the ARs are within, about an 8% range. Not all of them, but most of the good ones. So it's not a big deal which one you want to use. I would say just use whichever one has the best roll. But the list would be, mathematically speaking, the FAMAS, then the Police M4, then the G36 Enhanced, and then the P416. Those are the four that you would like to aim for. I personally think the G36, like the difference between the G36 Enhanced and the P416 is like, I think it's like 2%, like it's very low. And then the AKM is like a little bit lower than the P416. Personally, I would just recommend a G36 or P416, but again, whatever you can get the best roll on is what you'd like to use. What I think the best roll on this would be is you either want the attribute roll down here to be damage to targets out of cover or damage to armor. Outside of that, the other ones aren't going to scale as well as this, so definitely try to get that. I would say go for damage to targets out of cover. My roll isn't that great, but is what it is. In terms of the talent, I only have Killer on this one because I forget why. I rolled something here. I don't know. I don't remember what I rolled, but I have Killer on this one just because it rolled like this. And Killer's pretty good. I do think that Strained is a little bit better, but when you're playing solo, Killer can be pretty good. You can get the crit damage buff up pretty frequently. However, if you're playing in a group, you can't really get this on kill effect all the time, especially if you're not just like plowing through a whole bunch of mobs. If you're doing like legendary or something, Killer's almost going to be useless. So at that point, then I would recommend something like Strained, which is going to give you a whole bunch of crit damage pretty much for free almost all the time while you're shooting. So that's just a huge damage buff, and this build is going to be very reliant on getting a whole bunch of crits. So using Strained is very pairs very well with the way that you're playing with the build. Alternatively, I would say maybe something like Boomerang, or not Boomerang, Breadbasket is okay, and then like maybe Ranger, but honestly, Strained is just good no matter what. It's always going to be really strong, and it just nets you the most damage overall. So trying to get a roll like this, or like my G36, is pretty good, but again, only use Killer if you're in solo, and then Strained if you're in a group. In terms of how you want to mod your gun, pretty much just crit chance, crit chance, crit chance, and then the 20 round mag. Pretty simple there. I like to use the Eagle Bear with the G36, but if you want to use G36 paired with a Bullet King or G36 with a Nemesis, do whatever you want to do there. Now in terms of the actual gear that we're going to be using, Providence we would already be using anyways, but it actually got a buff. The headshot damage used to be 10%, and it is now 15%, so we just got a little bit of a buff right there. Besides that, we're using pretty much what we've already been using. The only difference here is that you definitely want to get a one-piece Fenris someplace. You don't really have to use the Contractor's Gloves anymore because they nerf the damage to armor, and it's nice to get that additional crit chance, and you also get the assault rifle damage on top of that, whereas if you were to use the Petrov Gloves, you'd only be getting the LMG damage. Outside of using 3-piece Providence for the headshot damage, crit chance, and crit damage, which by the way is just a whole bunch of free damage, and outside of using the 1-piece Fenders for the assault rifle damage, you want to use the Coyote Mask and the Fox's Prayer knee pads. You don't have to use the Fox's Prayer knee pads. You could easily swap this out for a piece of Somber knee pads, which would give you 15% crit damage, and that would be pretty strong. And then you could just swap the damage to targets out of cover here for crit chance. However, I think the damage to targets out of cover outweighs this, but they're very similar in how much overall damage it's going to net you, so entirely up to you. Although I just like the damage to targets out of cover, and it's pretty much interchangeable with any build that I run, so it makes things very easy. The Coyote Mask, you don't have to use a Coyote Mask. If you have somebody else in your group using this, you could very easily swap to, another Somber piece. You could put on like a Providence Mask right here and then put on a Somber holster, or you could even go for one of the new brand sets that gives you 5% weapon damage for the 1 piece. Quickly talking about that brand set, it just mathematically doesn't give you as much damage as using these other pieces of gear would, so that's why we don't use it. However, it is decent if you want to use that. But the thing about the Coyote Mask is it just gives you a whole bunch of crit, pretty much for free. But again, if somebody else in your group is using it, you could very easily swap this out for something else, 1-piece Walker or something like that, if you so choose to. And then in terms of how we are going to be rolling each piece of gear, literally just weapon damage, crit, crit, crit everywhere on every single piece of gear. As you can see, my chest piece here isn't perfect because I have explosive resistance. I'd much rather have headshot damage or crit here. But for the chest talent, you want glass cannon. You don't have to run glass cannon. Of course, if you're just trying to get as much raw damage as humanly possible, glass cannon is going to be your best bet. But you could also run obliterate for, without having to risk survivability, and you also get a decent amount of extra free weapon damage as well. And then, like I said, for every other piece of gear, you just want to go for as much crit as humanly possible. And then for the backpack, I highly recommend the concussion talent. You can also go for vigilance, but when playing with an AR, you're not going to be able to maintain this buff all of the time. But 25% damage is a whole lot of damage. So if you play, I guess, safe-ish, you can retain this buff pretty frequently. But I think concussion is just much more consistent. You can also use Unstoppable Force if you're playing solo, but in a group, Unstoppable Force is really not that great. Ultimately, the stats that you're looking for is around 45 to 50% crit chance. This is the amount of crit chance that I have with my Eagle Bearer out. But if I were to put on my G36, I'd be at about 50%. That's where you want to be, because what's going to happen is you're going to more frequently have the 0 to 15 and the 15 to 25 buff up, and you don't want to be wasting this 10% crit chance. If you see yourself going over like 55% crit chance, I would swap some of those rolls out for crit damage. And if you get to a point where I'm at right now, like, I'd probably roll this explosive damage to headshot damage instead of crit chance, because that would put me, if I were to put like 5% crit chance here, that puts me above the 50% that I'm already at, which means that I lose some value out when I have the secondary buff here from my mask, because 5% crit chance would pretty much just be going to waste at that point. So I'd rather go for some more headshot damage. But as long as you're at around the 40 to 50% crit chance mark, and then you just put the rest all into as much crit damage as humanly possible, and then if there's any left over, put it into headshot damage, you're perfectly fine. For the rest of my stats, it's pretty basic, nothing too crazy here. And yep, that's pretty much it for the build. In terms of the skills, I like to use the drone, the fixer drone, and I like to use the reviver hive, but that's pretty standard. You can use, whatever you want. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe for videos similar to this one. Let me know down in the comments below what builds you guys would like to see from me in the next few days, and I will definitely be making sure to work on that. And any other videos that you'd like to see, it doesn't have to be a build necessarily. Please let me know down there below. And yeah, here's some gameplay of me just, running around with the guns and shooting them. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.
On camera again. The holding area is just ahead. Once you find that laptop, grab it and get the hell out of there. intel that's going to be a whole lot of help to Odessa in the short term.